Welcome, 8th graders! Okay, I know the phrase formative quiz usually makes people kind of want to run for the hills. But today for our explainer, we're actually going to look at something truly remarkable. We're exploring this fascinating intersection where the pure logic of linear equations directly mirrors the depth of our own spiritual journeys. I know, that sounds like a huge leap, right? Algebra on one side, your spiritual walk on the other. But honestly, by the end of our time together, you're going to see just how beautifully these two paths align. Today is all about taking our formative path, assessing exactly where we stand mathematically, and applying those exact same principles to our personal growth. Let's get started. To really anchor everything we're doing today, 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5 gives us this incredibly powerful instruction. It says, "Examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith." It's such a profound concept, isn't it? In our academic lives, we have formative quizzes to examine our understanding. But this vital piece of scripture reminds us that spiritual self-reflection is just as absolutely crucial. You see, taking an assessment, it isn't a punishment at all. It's actually a really profound tool for self-awareness. It's basically how we figure out our coordinates, so to speak, in our walk of faith.
So that brings us to a very practical question. Why does taking a quiz actually matter? It's so easy to just see it as a random number in a gradebook, but it's way more than that. Look, reflection helps us grow. Taking a quiz allows you to clearly see exactly where you're strong and where you might need just a little more support. Just like examining your faith keeps your spiritual life totally healthy, taking the time to assess your academic skills keeps you moving in the right direction. It helps you recognize your progress and really target those specific areas where you can still improve.
Okay, let's dive into this TEKS 8.1D formative quiz. Here's your simple roadmap to success. Step 1. Definitely use scratch paper for your tables and actual graph paper for your sketches. Precision really matters here. Step 2. Label all your points super clearly. Don't leave anyone guessing where your coordinates are. And step 3. Answer each question fully and, take that extra split second to check your work. You've totally got this. Following these simple, structured steps just sets you up to demonstrate exactly what you know. All right, let's start the actual assessment with Section 1, Graphing Your Path. For your very first challenge, you're going to graph the equation y equals 2x minus 1. The absolute best way to start is by filling out a simple table to generate at least 3 points. Think about your inputs, your x values, right? If you plug in a 0 for x, well, 2 times 0 is 0, minus 1 gives you a y of negative 1. Boom, there's your first point. Try plugging in a 1 and then maybe a 2. Calculate your outputs, write them down in your table, and then plot those exact coordinates on your graph paper. Seeing those points line up perfectly, well, that's the first step in charting your path. Moving right along, let's transition into Section 2, Slopes and Intercepts Explained. And this brilliantly illustrates the core mechanics of a linear equation. Consider the equation y equals 4x plus 2. Your task here is to identify and define the slope and the y-intercept. Remember that classic form, y equals mx plus b? The m is our slope, which tells us exactly how steep the line is. So in this case, our slope is 4, meaning we rise 4 units for every 1 unit we run to the right. And the b is our y-intercept, which is just the point where our path crosses the y-axis. Right here, that starting point is a positive 2. Mastering this means you can literally instantly visualize a line just by reading its equation. Now for a slightly different challenge. Finding the x-intercept of the equation y equals negative 3x plus 6. We literally just talked about the y-intercept, but the x-intercept is where our line crosses the horizontal x-axis. And how exactly do we find that? Well, we know that anywhere on that x-axis, our y value is exactly 0. So to solve this one, you just need to plug in a 0 for y and solve the equation for x. Try it on your scratch paper. It's an incredibly important skill to calculate exactly where a specific path grounds itself. Let's see how all this builds into reality with Section 3, Real-World Linear Equations. So, imagine you're on a bus, and that bus is traveling at a nice, steady rate of 50 miles per hour. I want you to take a quick moment to write an equation that represents this scenario, and then sketch a quick graph. Think about our variables here. Your distance totally depends on the time you've been traveling. So for every single hour that passes, you travel 50 miles. If y is distance and x is time, how would you write that? And when you sketch it, think about where the line begins. At 0 hours, you've traveled 0 miles, right? It makes total sense. This is just a perfect example of taking an abstract mathematical concept and bringing it right to life. And that brings us beautifully to Section 4, the meaning of 0. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is interpreting the actual data. Look at the equation y equals negative 5x plus 20. Do you notice that negative slope? That means something is actively decreasing. So maybe you have $20 in your pocket and you're spending $5 every single day. Think deeply about what the zero, the x-intercept, means in that specific real-life context. At what exact point does y become zero? And what does that actually represent in the real world? Well, it represents the exact moment your resource is entirely depleted, the moment things run out.
But here, my friends, is where we really bridge the gap between our math lesson and our spiritual reflection. Let's compare zero in math to zero in life. In math, as we just saw, zero is often the x-intercept. It's a fixed point on a graph where a value just runs out. But in life, hitting a zero does not mean you failed. It doesn't mean the journey is over. When you hit a zero in life, it really just means you are at a brand new starting point. It's a launch pad that God can use to send you in an entirely better direction. God specializes in taking our zeros and turning them into incredible new beginnings.
This wonderful realization leads us directly to Section 5, Education and Biblical Morality. So, the absolutely crucial point is this. The heroesmartacademy Godly Learner series purposefully intertwines biblical morality with your education. And you might ask why? Because, frankly, education without morality ultimately hurts. What is the point of being incredibly smart, of knowing how to graph every complex equation out there, if you just continue making choices that hurt yourself and the people around you? Furthermore, Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 7 promises us that true peace of mind comes to everyone who keeps their mind spiritual. When we combine sharp academics with a spiritual mind, we experience that genuine peace. This isn't just theory, guys. It's an empowering daily reality for people who engage deeply with this content.
You know, graphs reveal what's happening right beneath the surface, showing us how things are growing or declining over time. I want you to view your spiritual life exactly like one of the graphs you sketched today. Take a moment right now to genuinely reflect on where you're going. Is your walk with God trending upward, or is the line starting to dip? Remember, even if you are at a zero right now, that is just God's starting point for your next great ascent. So, as we wrap up today, ask yourself, what is the slope of your spiritual path right now? And what is one single change you can make today to steepen the climb?